afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our Essential Mathematics core for the Victorian Curriculum webinar this afternoon. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered and pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. My name is Emma Kapler and I look after I'm the Victorian Education Sales Manager, and I also look after schools in the inner city, Bayside and Mornington Peninsula areas in Melbourne. I'm now going to introduce you to our friendly Victorian sales team. We have Paula Kelly. Paula looks after the schools in the west and also the regional areas in the west. Carolyn Chalora. Carolyn looks after the schools in the north and also the regional areas in the north. And we have Jenny Nelson, who looks after the schools in the east and southeast and the regional areas of the southeast. And now to our wonderful author and presenter for this afternoon, who you're going to see very shortly, David Greenwood. David is the head of maths at Trinity Grammar and has over 25 years of experience teaching maths. He's written over 30 titles and has run numerous workshops regarding the implementation of the Victorian curriculum. If I didn't mention, he also has over 25 years experience teaching maths. I'm actually going to hand you over to David now, and you'll see me later on. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you, Emma, for that introduction, and it's great to see, well, I can't see anybody, but it's great to see so many people coming along to this webinar today about the new Essential Maths course series that's being published this year, ready for use next year. To start off, I'd just like to say that the new core series is one that supersedes the gold editions, which you may be familiar with. The gold series was in its second edition, being used this year, and the core series is effectively a new edition of that gold series. Now, for the purpose of this workshop, I'd like to use two keywords to describe the main series from Cambridge so we don't get confused. So the first one I've already mentioned, that's the core series, which replaces the gold. And the other series, Essential Mathematics for the Victorian Curriculum, second edition, which was published last year, I will use the word essential to describe that series. So two series, the Essential series and the core series, which is new, coming out, ready for next year. So with some level of detail today, I'd like to look at the key features of the core series and the connections that they make with the Essential Maths series that I referred to earlier. I'd like to look at the ways in which the core and essential can be used to create a wide variety of differentiated learning pathways, the new tools for self-learning and diagnostic assessment, some of the new curriculum mapping resources that we have included, including some of the new literacy resources in the core, and the latest digital interface for teaching and assessment that is currently being used with the Essential series. At this stage, I'd like to introduce Scott Halligan. Emma mentioned him before, but he'll be with me through this presentation, and he is the chief publisher of the new course series coming out. And so, hello Scott there.
And David, thanks. I'll just mention right now that if anyone's not aware, the way that questions Q&A will work in the webinar is that there is a feature that you can access. I think it should pop up at the bottom of your screen as you hover over. It actually says Q&A, and that is by clicking on that and then typing in your answer into the box that comes up. The panelists, David, myself, Emma, and others will be able to see your questions, and we'll either answer them in that field during the presentation, or we'll flag them as something we'll actually talk about, either David or myself or Emma during the webinar. So that's the place for questions and answers.
Excellent. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so let's get started. So how do core and essential compare, and what do they have in common to start with? So first of all, it's very important to note that the core series, following on from gold, does cover all the content descriptors of the Australian curriculum. That's very important. You might have felt that perhaps the gold series was written for only a couple of students in your class, but this is not true. The gold and the new series for core does cover all the content descriptors for that level from the Victorian curriculum. Both series, core and essential, have strong differentiated learning pathways, which I'll talk about today a little bit. And they now have similar types of print and digital resources. So the core resources will now be up to date compared to the essential series, which was published last year. But looking at the core, perhaps you could say that the unique to core is that more time is spent reviewing key content before moving forward. There are more consolidating sections, and there are more sections focusing on key content of the Australian curriculum, and less material that you might regard as being extension, leading to, say, math methods and specialist maths. So less time doing that and more time looking at key content of the Australian curriculum at the right level. There's a gentler gradient through that content, still working through the 4 proficiency strands in core, but a much gentler gradient and a more realistic enrichment opportunity. And all the assessment resources that come with core, both print and digital, are set and more realistic for the level of problems that are inside each of the sections. Unique to essential that many of you would be familiar with is, of course, the fact that there are more compact sections reviewing earlier content. There's a wider range of problems of varying difficulty throughout each lesson, and a more significant opportunity to open up extensions for higher level pathways, perhaps leading to methods and specialists. All right, I'll just go back to the main levels of differentiation for the series. So what we believe at Cambridge is that the teacher should be controlling the classes that they have, and the series, essential series and the core series, allows teachers to offer a wide range of courses and pathways for their students without losing control of what's going on in the classroom. So these levels of differentiation are described here as 3 levels. So the first level would be, of course, which series you're going to use. Is it the core series, covering all the Australian curriculum and not offering a great deal of extension leading to methods? Or is it essential maths on the other side? At the second level, teachers could choose which sections they would like to use as part of their course during the year. And to help students do that, we have classified each section with the words consolidating, standard, and extension, making it easier for teachers to choose which sections might be appropriate for their classes. So that's the second level of differentiation. And the third level is which learning path to take through those lessons. And so we have 2 pathways for core and 3 pathways for essential maths. At the second level, with the section classifications that I mentioned, I've just provided here 2 examples. The left-hand one is for essential maths and the right one is for core. And you can see from these snips from the contents that we have these classifications consolidating for index notation in chapter 6, and in the probability chapter 10 in core on the right hand side, the consolidating title is used for 4A, reviewing of probability. So these sections do cover content from previous years' content descriptors in the Victorian curriculum. At the other end of the scale, you can see on the left-hand side, there are 2 extending sections because they go beyond the Victorian curriculum at Year 9, looking at an introduction to STRANDS. And all the other sections in that chapter are central to the Victorian curriculum at Year 9. Now, in Year 10 core, you can see there are no sections titled Extending, and that's because the core series does not cover extending sections leading to methods or the 10A content descriptors of the Victorian curriculum. And so there are no extending sections, but we have put a gold star on a couple of sections from time to time. And that is an author's view, if you like, on what sections in the chapter are more challenging. And perhaps you might agree that conditional probability and independence of events in Year 10, while it's in the Australian curriculum and not 10A, would be a more challenging aspect to that topic. So that's the second level of differentiation. At a more micro level, many of you would be familiar with our pathways through each lesson in the series. And so the top example is from Year 8, Essential Maths. And what I've done here is I've just snipped out all the pathways through the exercise for 5F in Year 8. And you can see the the 3 pathways are shown there. The left-hand side is the easiest pathway called Foundation. The middle pathway leads students through sort of an average range, if you like, of questions through the different proficiency strands. And the right-hand pathway is the most challenging, with less work in fluency, the more challenging problem-solving and reasoning questions, and the enrichment pathway. For the core series, we have a very similar setup, but we have 2 pathways. And this provides a level of differentiation that doesn't really separate students from the content. It just separates their sets of problems that they might do in the classroom, and provides a little bit of enrichment as well, depending on how teachers feel about where students are at in that lesson. Now, these pathways are called work programs, and these work programs are collated together in Word documents available for teachers to use. And this is just a section of one where a number of lessons, you can see 5A, 5B, and 5C and 5D are visible. And these are all collated onto a work document. So if you were planning your course and you wanted to produce something like this for your students, summarising the different problems that they need to do, then these work programs are available on the teacher resources site. At my school, we use these documents to help plan our course, and we modify them slightly and subtract or add a couple of features depending on what we want to do at our school. Just to summarise where things are at in terms of these pathways for the core and the essential, this poster, while it does need a little bit of updating for the new core because it's not called gold anymore, it does highlight the flexibility in how the books can be used. So the left 2 columns are suggested pathways using the core series, and the right, the orange 3 columns show how the essential might be used. So one pathway would be for your very brightest students to use on the right-hand column, where only a selected number of consolidating sections are being taught. All the core material and most of extending or 10A sections might be used. So this is and they might use the work program with the advanced tab. So less fluency, higher level problem solving and reasoning and enrichment. So that might be the highest level course, leading perhaps to methods and specialists. At the other end, a weaker student might be in a course where they're using the core series, and they might use all the consolidating sections and only selected gold star sections. And they might use the left tab, the easiest tab, leading through. Now, since the the books, especially from 7 to 9, are written in such a way that the chapters work in tandem, if you like, then it would be realistic that students could move from left to right through these pathways leading into year 11 and 12. If the core and essential are being used in the same class, and I understand that many schools sometimes do this, they might use the essential maths for the majority and they might use core for 1 or 2 students. If this is in fact the case in some classes, then we have designed a document to allow teachers to use both books in the same class and teach the same topics at the same time. And this document shows teachers and students which sections they could do to correspond to the lesson that's being taught. Now, this is possible at year 7, 8 and 9 because the correlation between core and essential is very, very high, and this is achievable. At year 10, however, the year 10 core series, the year 10 core book, I should say, is not aligned directly chapter by chapter with the essential series. And so this document does not exist for year 10, but it is certainly available in the teacher resources as a document which can be used. All right, now if I can just now move on to some of the key features of core and essential, because many of the features of essential maths are now being updated for core as well. So one of the things we have done with the new series is to introduce a second type of diagnostic piece or assessment which teachers can use at the start of a topic. The old warm-up quiz or pre-test, if you like, still exists as part of the core series, and we've called that the warm-up quiz. And that generally covers material which reviews previous work and makes connections with content that may have been taught in previous years. But now we have a new diagnostic test which tests what students already know about the upcoming topic. And both of these tests are available in handout, printable form, or as a digital test, which is auto-marked. One of the new features of Essential, which came out this year, which will be that of learning intentions, and this will be incorporated into the new core series as well. Some of you may be familiar with the significant amount of research which talks about the importance of students knowing what the learning objectives are for each lesson. And so these learning intentions tell students what they should know, what they should understand and be able to do by the end of the lesson. And so the authors have included learning intentions at the beginning of every lesson. And this is there to help provide focus. It's also there to unpack the Victorian curriculum content descriptors at a more micro level and to help teachers assess the level of achievement that we're aiming for. Now, the language used here is to know, to understand, and to be able to. And all the learning intentions are written in this format. These examples that you can see are taken from Year 10 trigonometry. The top version is for Essential and is a more compact chapter or section, if you like, which deals with a number of elements of trigonometry, and that's why there are 4 learning intentions. The corresponding section in core, however, has less learning intentions, and that's because trigonometry is spread out over really a greater number of lessons in core compared to Essential. And the main reason for that is that Essential moves on to much of the 10A material, whereas the core doesn't. With the core series, one thing we've added in this new edition coming up is key vocabulary as part of the learning intentions. And so all these words, the key words that are defined in the section, are listed here. Most of them are defined as part in the key ideas, and all of them are fully defined in the new glossary as well. Now, these learning intentions, we think, will be helpful for teachers as well as students. And so we have collated all these learning intentions into a Word document, which is available on the teacher resource site. Moving on to our examples. Of course, we'll continue to have examples throughout the text with the attached videos for every example, including solutions and explanations. However, our research shows that many teachers and students use these examples as they are, sometimes as the example as part of the lesson, either using the video or in a flipped learning model, and students are definitely referencing these examples to help them through. So for that reason, we have decided to write a now you try example for every existing example in the text. This means that if the example is being used or the video is being used, then there is another one that can be tried without the solution being printed there for students' development in that idea. And this could be used as either part of the lesson or part of the homework if you're in a flipped learning model. The answers for these now you try questions are printed in the textbook and are available. And just while I'm talking about examples, of course, one of the differences between core and essential is that the core includes more smaller examples spread out more across the exercise. So there's less jump, if you like, between concept development and methods developed throughout the exercise, and there's less to refer to in each example. Whereas in essential, there are more ideas connected together in each of the examples. I won't spend a great deal of time talking through the exercises. Many people would be familiar with them, but as you know, the proficiency strands in the Australian or the Victorian curriculum underpin the way in which each exercise is structured. And that is through the proficiency strands of understanding, fluency, problem solving, reasoning, and well, enrichment and extension is not a proficiency strand, but we wanted to make sure that there were questions available in every exercise that could be regarded as being extension or enrichment, true for core as well as essential. So the core series still has an enrichment without really having to go on to next year's work. The questions are selected so that there is something for every proficiency strand. So in problem solving, for example, we've tried to invent questions which may involve formulation or interpretation or modelling, making choices. There might be multi-layered questions and so on. I'll just note here that with the learning pathways, that's the work programs through the exercises, that these are actually printed in the textbook with all these proficiency strands. And in the digital version, these tabs, which tell students which questions to do, are live. And so if they are to do, say, questions 2 and 4 only from the first section, then questions 1 and 3 will disappear if they click on the tab. And I'll demonstrate this a little bit later in this presentation. The progress quiz continues to be a feature of the core and series, and that is a quiz that it can be completed about halfway through a chapter to provide some feedback for teachers on how they're going and feedback to students as well. This is printed in the text, but it's also available as a handout with spaces provided if teachers wanted to use this as like a mini test halfway through a topic. And there's also an auto-marked version, a digital version of these progress quizzes. So the results can be auto-marked. Could even be a homework quiz. At the end of the chapter, we retain the Maths at Work investigations in the core series. And these are activities which apply the mathematics of the section in the workplace, as opposed to in the essential, where we have some applications and problem-solving tasks, 3 extended response questions, which get students to formulate ideas, make calculations, and communicate solutions. And they are positioned in essential maths about 2/3 of the way through each chapter. The Maths at Work in the core is positioned at the end of the chapter. Investigations are not printed in the text, but they are still available digitally in both core and essential, as are the puzzles and challenges pages. However, for core, these pages focus more on what you might call as puzzles and games. And you can see by these 2 examples from core that you might categorise them in the same way. Well, one of the new features we're putting into core is called the success criteria. And these work in tandem with the learning intentions that are listed at the start of every section. So thinking about those learning intentions, once you get to the end of the chapter, you could ask, what can I do now that I've considered those learning intentions and I have worked through the chapter? What can I now do? And these are called the success criteria. The idea is to help teachers and students to decide as to whether or not we have in fact achieved the key learning objectives. Now, for each success criteria, we also have provided an example to give students and teachers an idea of what that criterion means. The links are there as well, so if a student feels that one criterion cannot be met, then they know which section to go back and work on. The Mind Maps chapter summary is very popular, and they'll be retained in the core series along with Essential, as will the chapter review. However, there will be one change there, and that is that we are going to start our chapter reviews with the short answer questions rather than the multiple choice. Now, the reason for that is that the short answer questions, in a sense, are more comprehensive in terms of coverage of the content of the chapter compared to multiple choice, and we felt it appropriate that that should be done first before filling in the gaps with multiple choice and then trying the extended response questions. There are semester reviews as well as the chapter reviews that I'm sure some people are familiar with. Now, I did mention before that we have done some work on the glossary, and this is very important for the core series. Now, as I mentioned, there are learning intentions and there are key ideas in each section. And so all the bolded words in the key ideas are in the learning intentions and called key vocab. And all the key vocab, all the key vocabulary are also then defined in the glossary. And so the glossary is a little more comprehensive than what people might have been used to in the previous Gold edition. But there is a strong connection now between keywords defined in the key ideas in each section, what are the keywords in the learning intentions, and then corresponding definition in the glossary. Now, one of the key elements of the Victorian curriculum is that we have an introduction to algorithmic thinking. And many people might be familiar with the chapter in the Essential Maths, and the core series also has a chapter devoted to this new area of mathematics. The way in which we've dealt with this in Essential and in Core is to have a separate chapter with one task for each major content strand of the Victorian curriculum. So rather than just having one task for each book, focusing on just one of the content strands, like in the elaborations, advice given to the authors says that we could try to come up with tasks to cover each of the major content strands. That's number and algebra, probability and statistics, measurement and geometry. So one could use these as maybe a separate project at a given time in the year, or they could be taken out and combined with the most relevant unit of work. So for example, in year 8, there are 3 tasks, 3 projects. One uses flowcharts, which of course is an important part of coding and algorithmic thinking, to explore divisibility tests. That covers number and algebra. There's another task using pseudocode, sort of a general form of code that is used then to sort data and to run a simulation. And then spreadsheets are utilised as well in the 3rd project to try to maximise the area of a rectangle numerically. And that corresponds to the measurement and geometry. And those are positioned in the final chapter of the core series and essential as well. Now, talking about digital. Now, a lot of the time we refer to things which are printed in the text, but of course, all the things there are also have a digital version. And I would like to focus on a few things, especially the workspaces, auto marking and teacher resources. So I'm just going to flick over to an example of a core digital page. And this one is for Year 10 Core Section 1E. And you can see that all the features here now correspond to the features of Essential Series. So the section information, including the learning intentions, are all live here. The lesson starter that teachers may wish to use to start their lesson, to explore an idea before they get on to more formal examples. You can see all the keywords here in the key ideas. So these bolded words are all in the learning intentions and in the glossary, and all the examples with live videos as well. Here, there are the examples with their solution and explanation. You might remember the Now You Try that I mentioned earlier on. They are, of course, always here. Answers as well. As far as the exercises go, the new system is operational here. You can see if I click on the live bar, this is up here, we have the 2 differentiated work programs here. So the left-hand side is perhaps the weaker students, and the right-hand side is for the stronger students. The weaker are going to do more of the understanding questions. The stronger will only do question 3. You can see when I click on question 3, the other questions disappear. Let's say move to fluency. You can see I have used my pen and using one of the workspaces, which is now available with the new core series. We'll try that one again. You can see I can either type a solution, I could draw or upload an image into these workspaces now. So all that working that students could do here electronically, instead of working on their workbook, would then be fed back to the teacher database, and teachers could then collate that information and see the amount of work that students are doing.
I'll just jump in, David, just to say something about that upload feature. So as David, you mentioned that students can type using the keyboard and the symbol palettes. That's the first option, or they can use the a stylus and the drawing tool to hand write their solution in. But that third option, upload, is that's for a situation where a student just finds it more convenient to do their working out with a pen and paper rather than using those other 2 tools. And once they've done their working out on pen and paper, they can take a photo of that on their phone or whatever and just upload the image, and the teacher will see their working, the image of their working as they would if they used any of the other options.
Yeah, good, thank you. The other features that people have learnt to expect, the live walkthrough examples and the quizzes. So these are the digital auto-marked quizzes, 2 quizzes for every section in core. corresponding to the 2 work programs. In essential maths, people might know that as 3 quizzes corresponding to the 3 work programs. So the quiz 1 is slightly easier than quiz 2. All the data collected from that also fed back to the teacher resource database. Notice here we've got the Desmos interactive tools available here as well, also in the new setup for core. We have the graphing calculator, the geometry tool, scientific calculator, and the matrix calculator. I'll just give you an example where one can quickly, very easily, using this Desmos tool, create constructions without really knowing too much about the software. Might just do another one. I'm actually going to create, what is it, circle theorem number 3. I'll just measure a couple of angles. Okay, and this is built into the Cambridge product, so you don't need to go to a different website to access this resource and drag things around. You can look at the angles, a demonstration of circle theorem number 3, and if you do that, that's a demonstration of circle theorem number 4, isn't it? All right, so it's just another feature within. Now, Scott, I might just talk a little bit about the teacher resources. I've mentioned some of the resources so far, like those collated learning intentions as a Word document, the documents which show how core and essential can be used together in the same classroom. And if I click on some of these files, Scott, could you just run through some of the others?
Sure thing. So just while David is getting that up, one thing to mention for anyone who's familiar with the main essential series is that the core series, as the gold, current and previous gold series did, the core series will have a larger range of worksheet and test types than the essential series. So so David has some of them there. That first set is a set of worksheets. These are very similar to the ones in the essential series. The worksheets in core are a little bit easier than the ones in the essential series. Just having a network issue that I'll just address quickly. The worksheets for core are easier, as all the tests and everything in this package are. Any question that relates to a topic in the worksheets or these literacy sheets or the chapter tests or anything, any question that relates to a topic in the book that is starred, that has a gold star next to it to identify it as challenging, also has a gold star now in the actual worksheet as well. To make things easier for teachers, just so you know, these Word documents are rateable, so you can delete those questions if you don't want your students to do them. The skill sheets are skill and drill type activities. They're pretty self-explanatory. Literacy worksheets are activities designed to get at the heart of the mathematical literacy of that particular topic. They're intended to get students to familiar and comfortable with the language, the mathematical language of that topic. These include definitions, perhaps being given a scenario, it could be a geometrical situation or trigonometry or a graph or something like that, and then being asked to describe in words the mathematics of what's going on. There's also some crosswords and things like that. So that's what those literacy activities are. The printable handouts that David has mentioned earlier in the webinar, those are worksheet versions of some of the other material that is either in the print book or in the interactive textbook. So those diagnostic pretests, the main form of those is an auto-marked quiz, but these, clicking on that link that David has his mouse on there, will bring up a Word document version that can be done in class on paper. The same with the warm-up tests as well as the progress quizzes. And finally, those chapter tests, there are 2 differentiated chapter tests there, an A test and a B test, and they correlate to the 2 working programs through the book, the building and the progressing. So one is a little bit easier than the other one.
All right, good. So just a couple of the features in the teacher resources. We won't have time to run through every single thing, Scott, on that page. Like the task manager might be something that might need a little bit more time than just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that task manager there is something that I would encourage you to get in touch with your rep about. That's a new feature for this year that we'll just be working on and improving. But as it stands now, it's a way for you to set pathways through the interactive version of this book, including all of the various activities and features that David has gone through. So, for example, you might want to set a pathway through a topic that involves a student starting each subtopic in the chapter with perhaps a discussion of the understanding questions or the key ideas. Then they might want to go to try some of the Now You Try questions that follow every worked example. Then they might want to watch the videos that are connected to those worked examples. Then they might want to try a few walkthroughs in that particular topic, followed by the easier exercise questions, and then followed by a quiz or something like that. So that can all be set up fairly easily with the templates that we'll provide in that what is called the task manager there. So that is a big, fairly comprehensive feature that we can't show or go into today, but it'll take another hour to get through it. But I encourage you to approach your rep about that and get them to demonstrate that to your faculty.
And thank you for mentioning, Scott, what we've done with the understanding questions I didn't mention earlier, and that was we've reviewed the understanding questions so that they become more discussion points. So if teachers wanted to explore ideas as a class a little bit more and to make sure the correct connections have been made with previous ideas or previous content in the Victorian curriculum, then they may wish to use the understanding questions at the start of the exercise as part of a discussion rather than setting it as a workbook exercise. And so the questions have been reworded to allow for that flexibility. It's probably worth mentioning that when students are working through their digital text, they have a place where they can provide some feedback for their teachers on how they're going. So yes, they can write their solutions and check their answers, but they can also let their teacher know how they're going in that particular section or that particular group of parts of questions. And they can also flag a particular part of a question or a question in its entirety to their teacher to say, I really need some help with this question. That information then heads off to the teacher database, and then they receive some information that might look like this, where a teacher sees how much work is being completed and how many red flags are being raised by a particular student. In another window, a teacher can see all those red flags collated for question by question for a particular exercise, so they can see how their class is going across a particular exercise, and it might give them the right information so they can better prepare for the beginning of the next class. So for example, if red flags appear by many students for question 9A, then perhaps that question is a good one to go over as part of the next lesson. All right, Scott, are there any other questions in the question and answer that we could deal with now before I hand back to Emma?
One thing, David, I think it might be good for you to weigh in on is there are a few questions about the level of student that this series is aimed at, and in particular, I mean, contrasting it with the main essential series, but also in particular about where students are going to go to after year 10. So could you talk a little bit about that, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier when you went through the pathways poster, but for example, if there was a question that asked if a student was intending to do further maths at units 3 and 4, would the core series be the best option for them, or the essential series, or do other things play into it as well?
That's right. Look, great question. And of course, all heads of maths and maths teachers are dealing with this all the time as students do their subject selections for the following year. But yes, look, I'll address that with this slide. Both the core and essential have been set up. They've been well aligned, year 7, 8, and 9. So there's a high level of flexibility. And schools are best placed, and teachers are best placed to decide which book would be used for a particular class or a particular student. But ultimately, if students are on a pathway through to further maths, then the core series is probably the best book for them. But as students are wanting the option of math methods in year 11, then they would probably need to be working from the essential series, mainly because it's a higher level, there's a greater range of problems there, and there are sections devoted towards that pathway into math methods or higher. So where does the core fit into a school? Well, I guess it depends on people's view on their school and what level it's really operating at. But I guess if someone viewed their own school as a high-performing school in general, then perhaps core would be more for a specific class or one or two classes, or a number of students in a particular class, but only a few, where those particular students might head to further maths. If the majority of students at that high-performing school are trying to keep math methods as an option open, then they would need to be using essential maths for the majority of classes. For a medium-level performing school, then we might have a situation where the core is used in a number of classes, perhaps half the classes in 7, 8, and 9, or perhaps even 2/3 of the classes for year 10 leading to the general or further maths pathway. Or for a lower level school, which is still finding its feet really, and where the majority of students are heading to further maths, then it could be for the majority of classes 7 through to 10.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. That's a good way to answer that. One other thing that a few people have asked about is your perspective, or Cambridge's perspective, on students. I mean, you've shown some of the digital features that allow, for example, students to do their working out via the workspaces, and also the auto-marked quizzes and all those kinds of things. What is our perspective on students doing work that way in the digital environment compared to the benefits they might get through doing them on pen and paper? And one thing I'll say just before you answer that is we're certainly aware of that, and if it was up to me, and this is how I learn anything I do, not just mathematics, certainly writing it out on pen and paper is the best way to retain something, in my opinion. And we certainly are aware of that, and we make most of the different types of auto-marked material or worksheets available in every single option, whether it's a printable handout that can be done on pen and paper or an auto-marked quizzes. So we've tried to be flexible there. So David, do you want to weigh in on that one?
No, it's a great question, because we're at that point with technology where we could, if we wanted to, just hand everything over to an algorithm to decide what the pathway is for students. But I think it's a strong belief at Cambridge and through the authors, not as just authors, but as teachers, that students really need to be writing solutions in some form. If only an answer box is available, then that would encourage students really to try to just go for an answer every single time and then really not develop their mathematics at all or communication skills. So if we're going down the digital path, we need to have that writing ability, and hence the workspaces available in the digital form. I think the Essential series, both core and essential, can be used in both environments. I think certainly at our school, we have teachers that prefer students write all their solutions on a workbook, but they're using many of the digital features as well. So some of the quizzes are auto-marked, some of the tests, but the communication of problems are done by hand on paper. However, this can now be achieved using the workspaces if teachers would prefer that all working and not just answers to be done in a digital form.
Yeah, well said. And I think the other thing there is that we certainly don't expect, even though there is the capability to do any question in the textbook using the workspaces feature, the most realistic and convenient way of using that is really to just, it could be a situation where, as sort of an exit pass type idea where, or for homework, you would target maybe 1 or 2 questions that you could send to the students or ask them to do in the online version, so that you can get a sense of where the class is at with a targeted question to really see where they're up to.
Great point.
Rather than asking them to do the whole lot.
Yep. All right, we might have some more time for questions at the end, but given the time, I think I might stop sharing now and head over to Emma, if that's okay, to answer a few things and to wind up.
Hi everyone. So on screen now you can see the your purchasing options. We've got pricing and whether you want print and digital or digital only, and of course the online teaching suite there as well. Should you decide to adopt our series, we would certainly provide you with complimentary copies of student textbooks plus the online teaching suites. We'd go ahead and create your accounts for you. Now, the availability for these textbooks for Year 7, we expect bulk stock to arrive late September, the Year 8 book towards the end of November. Year 9, we are expecting that in mid-November, and the Year 10 towards the end of September. We do have online page proofs that you can view, and also please do get in touch with your rep if you'd like further information on the series. We have fantastic digital presentations to share with you, and a whole lot of other information. So I really strongly advise you to get in touch with your rep for further information on this series. Now I'm going to actually invite David and Scott back on to ask questions. That's all I've got to say for now, but please do feel free to ask questions and stay on as long as need be. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. We'll just go through a couple of the questions. We may not be able to get to all of these tonight, but we'll certainly do our best. So some of these are sales type questions, and some of them are quite complex. So we may have to take it offline and get you to write into your rep or write to us, and we'll get back to you via email. But one question is, could you perhaps, Emma, just quickly describe what Cambridge Go is? There's a question about asking the difference between the Essential series and Cambridge Go. So my answer to that is that Cambridge Go is really the portal through which you access whatever Cambridge series. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. And then, of course, we have Essential Maths or the core text, and that's where your resource would sit in Cambridge Go.
Cool. Okay. We've just answered a question here online, but it's worth repeating. But the Gold series will indeed be replaced completely with this core series that we've been talking about today. There will be limited stock of the Gold series, the previous edition, the Gold series, available, and schools can top up copies if they need to. Lara, you asked, will assessment tasks that teachers have created from an earlier edition be migrated over to the new edition of the textbook? That's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. So unless anyone can answer that, it is a question that does come up from time to time when we do go to a new edition. Emma, do you know off the top of your head about that one?
It does come up, and I believe it doesn't migrate.
Yeah, okay. Marion, in this remote climate, can you do a test which is not multiple choice? Okay, so there are certainly multiple choice questions of different types throughout the different types of auto-marked material we have in this series, for both series, the core series and the essential series. But a lot of the practice quizzes that there are for every section, for example, some of them are multiple choice, but a lot of them are what we would call single input or multi-option or various other types of questions. So not just multiple choice. Yeah, so there's a range of different question types there throughout in the various types of auto-marked material in the series. This question here from Joshua: my school is worried about students who want to switch classes from the core class to the essential class, as students would need to buy both books. Has anyone else dealt with this issue? Emma, do you want to field that one?
Yep, so we wouldn't expect your student to purchase another resource in the middle of the year. We would certainly give them the digital access to the resource if they're switching over.
Okay, thanks very much for that. There is a comment here. Thanks for identifying it as such, as per the ABC's Q&A show. Well done. From Andrea here: in my experience, the workspace works very well as the students are able to show solutions. Most of the less inclined students are engaged in their learning as they don't need to write, and the workspaces helps them to be better organized. No need to worry about leaving workbook in the locker, etc. I love the autocorrect as I only need to focus on the learning required. Thumbs up to a great alternative to Maths Pathway. Thanks for saying that. So that is one of the focuses that we have, that we had with the workspaces, that we did want teachers to be able to see the raw data of what students had actually done when they were doing the working out to questions, including the way that they have misunderstood how to lay out a question, how they've the flaws in their mathematical logic as they work through the steps when answering a question, flaws in their mathematical grammar, and so on. So we certainly wanted teachers to be able to see all of that. So thanks for that comment.
Absolutely, Scott. I just 100% agree. Look, I just don't think one can progress in the subject if they're not showing how they are going to communicate a solution to a problem. I mean, if you look at what's going on at the year 11 and 12, the preparation is that you communicate a solution to a problem. Getting to an answer is great, but really to do that, an answer only at 7, 8, 9 and 10 would not be the right thing. And so the workspace is really that digital solution, if you like, for teachers who want students to show all that working and make it visible to teachers.
Yeah. Another question here from an anonymous questioner. I'm interested to know how you teach in the context of engaging students, and also your opinion on the inquiry approach to learning. David, would you want to field that one? So perhaps teaching mathematics to students who may not find themselves to have an aptitude for maths, and also the inquiry approach to learning as well. Yeah.
Well, I guess with the resources, we've tried to be as flexible as possible so that teachers could choose what method they would like to use. So, for example, using the Let's Start activity combined with the examples and the videos might allow teachers to ask students to explore an idea before just presenting the key ideas up front on the board. And so complementing that sort of exploration approach, we have, of course, the range of problems in through the proficiency strands, problem solving and reasoning, but there's also things like the investigations and the applications and problem solving and the maths at work type projects, which teachers could use as tools to investigate the mathematics throughout a unit of work. So not just using lesson by lesson, but using some of these other resources as well. So I guess the flexibility is there for teachers to choose the way in which they would like to run their classes. And the understanding questions, I think now with this new edition, supplies sort of a range of questions, providing more flexibility there as well, where teachers can use those as part of that exploration, if you like, of an idea before just presenting key ideas and setting problems.
Yep. Another question from registration. How have teachers what is the teacher's experience of doing exercise practice questions online compared to using a workbook? I think we've covered that earlier. One quick thing to say about that is in terms of us, we can see data when we test out how students go with doing things online, but we don't have currently data about how they go when they do the same questions using their workbook in their class. So it's a little bit difficult to compare that one. I think it's part of a larger debate that is had about learning online, especially with math. So yeah, that's a tough one to answer there. This one's from Callie. Will the tests incorporate some show questions? This would be great. David, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, so there are different types of tests. The ones that are auto-marked will probably have less types of questions where they're asked to show that or show a number of steps, if you like, because they're auto-marked. So they therefore will be looking for an answer for each of the questions. However, the fixed tests and skill sheets and so on should have more extended response type questions and questions where they have to show more working. Yeah,
well, that's exactly right. So there's a whole range of different types of show type questions particularly in the worksheets and the chapter tests as well of a different type, the maths literacy questions as well. So when asked in a sentence form what something is about, they then actually literally have to draw something or show in visual form what the worded version of the mathematics looks like. Another fun question here. With this looks like a comment as well on inquiry-based learning. With inquiry-based learning, I've found the investigations a really good starting point for writing a good inquiry project. Example, in Year 8, there is a card building investigation. That's right, we are going to get students to photo themselves making card buildings and then research how algebra is used in the building industry together with the investigation. I'm excited to see how that goes. Yeah, that is absolutely a great idea. So thanks for that comment. Yeah, I think that's about it. There's another, Callie, you mentioned that there are show questions like in further maths. Okay, show that the area of this is 20 centimeters squared. Yeah, there are questions like that in some of the chapter tests, I believe. So I think we've got to the end of all of the questions. And
I would just add, Scott, that I mean those types of questions fit quite nicely into problem solving and reasoning, right, and the gold star enrichment question. So if you have a bit of a flick through the text, you would find some of those questions there as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, David, for your wonderful presentation, and Scott too for your commentary throughout. That was absolutely fantastic. I actually think that was about all we've got to say today. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks to David for an awesome presentation.
All right, great. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.